Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the show where we discover the silver lining in life's most difficult stories. I'm your host, Toby Dorr. I'm so excited for my guest today, which all of you are going to be surprised at, I think. But anyway, my guest today is my husband, Christian Dorr. And I just kind of want to give you his perspective both on my story and also let him share his unique story with you guys too. So thanks so much for being here, Husbandor.
Hello, Tobador. Should I sing to you?
You sing to me?
Yeah, to get things started.
If you want to, go ahead.
Oh, Tobador, how lovely are your branches.
Oh, you're a goof. You're such a goof. So when I got out of prison, I had no intentions of ever getting married again. I was done with men, done with all the whole mess. I was just going to live my own little quiet life. And then in walks Christian Dorr. And that certainly wasn't in the cards for me to live a quiet little life because Chris is my biggest fan. I mean, we were riding on a train once and he said to some guy, "Oh, you brought cards. We should have brought our cards, Toby. We could have played cards." And the guy said, "What game do you like to play?" And tell him what you said, Chris.
I said, we like to play a game called Spite and Malice, which is a game that my wife learned in prison. And he started laughing, and it turned into sort of an awkward moment, but he didn't realize that passenger on the train didn't realize that I was not being funny necessarily, being a bit sarcastic, but not, I wasn't being untruthful. Let's put it that way.
No, and he looked at you and he said, "You are going to get in so much trouble for that when you get home, buddy."
Yeah.
And if only he knew. Anyway, I went to Boston right after I got out of prison. I took a job in Boston because I thought I was going to go somewhere where nobody knows my name. And I walked into this office where I was going to work, and I ended up sharing a desk with Chris. We had our desks facing each other. And so why don't you tell them the story of how we met, Chris?
Well, I'd already been working there for several years with a lifetime friend of mine where he and I grew up together in down East Maine, and then we wound up working together in Boston. And I had no idea that Toby was inbound. I didn't realize that she was going to be working with this friend of mine. And when she appeared, I didn't realize that we had a new employee that I was going to have to deal with. But she was there, and I was kind of caught off guard because, actually, the story of Oscar was one of my other coworkers who was a laborer on a job site, and he was picked up for, I don't know, speeding or drinking and driving or something, but they took him to jail, and this was up in Maine, not far away, maybe 2 hours drive. And I wrote him a letter, and while he was in jail, I wrote him a letter and was asking whether I could come and visit him. And I started putting the letter together, and Toby said, "Well, if you're going to send him a letter, then you need to know his inmate number." And I thought, what an unusual thing for somebody to know. What kind of trivial information would somebody know about sending a letter to an inmate somewhere, and knowing that I needed to have Oscar's inmate number or the letter wouldn't reach him. So that was a curious moment for me, and I wound up doing a bit of Google searching. This was back in 2008. Google wasn't very old at the time.
No,
Anyway,
was it?
no. And I found dozens of pages of information about Toby. Toby. So,
Yeah,
so
you came into the office the next day and you said, "We need to talk." And you weren't at all fazed by my story. In fact, you were kind of enamored by the story. Yeah, intrigued by the story. Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person to Well, let's put it this way. I've been through enough crap in my own life that I'm not the kind of person to pass judgment on other people and situations, circumstances that they've experienced, and even when they're pretty negative. So
Mhm.
going through prison, your visit to prison for a couple of years didn't phase me much. I
So
sort of
tell
judge
us a
people
little
on
bit.
uh, the
Go ahead.
I judge people by the cover of their book rather than what's in the content. You didn't scare me off. You were fairly simple and straightforward and had a smile on your face and intelligent and easy to talk to. And I didn't really think that any of that history that you brought with you was significant. Not really.
Mhm.
But since then, I've learned that it has a lot to do with you.
Yes,
Tr-
it does, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. The personalities are we we tend to, as human beings, we change a little bit as our circumstances allow our personalities to
Yeah.
develop, and you certainly are one of those people. So,
I think everything we experience affects us. We're not the same person today as we were yesterday, even. I mean, just
mhm,
in that short amount of time, things have happened in our lives that have made an impact in some way. And I think each day we are more than we were the day before.
yeah, but
So
February 12th made quite an impact on
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
That was a significant day.
your
Mhm.
next day and next 2 years and the next 20 years, they were impacted by that day pretty
They certainly
deeply.
were.
Yeah.
So, why don't you give us a little bit of background about your story, Chris? Because I think you have a pretty amazing story too.
Mm,
And
yeah.
maybe that's why we make such a good team because we both have somewhat unbelievable stories.
Yeah. Yeah, my story, I'm all over the map. There's nothing very grounded. It seems like every part of my story has always been with one foot out the door, whatever the next door was. My future was always, you know, a confusing area to expect where I'd go. There's no way to predict where my next step was going to land. Even though there were some times in my life where it seemed like it was grounded, but most of the time it wasn't. So I was born in Quincy, Massachusetts. I lived in Massachusetts until I was 8 or 9 years old, and I moved to Maine. My mom and my biological father had divorced, and my mom remarried to a guy named Gary Dorr. And I found myself at 9 years old waking up one morning far from the concrete jungle of Boston, Massachusetts, and all the crime and the sirens and the busy life and everything else, and found myself on a blueberry farm with nothing but thousands of acres of blueberries all around me and as far as the eye could see, and it was wonderful. And 8 years later, I graduated high school and I joined the Navy, and the Navy pulled me to San Diego and to Japan and Singapore and Hong Kong and Korea and uh, Australia and Diego Garcia, and the list goes on and on and on and on of all the places that I visited while I was in the Navy, and then
And the Persian Gulf.
in the Persian Gulf and Desert Storm
Mhm,
and aircraft carriers and bombs and killing and lots of interesting military experiences. And I was an electronics tech the whole time, just repairing radios.
mhm.
And then in the middle of all that, I also managed to meet a young lady that I fell in love with and got married to, and it was another extraordinary experience. Had a son with her, and she already had a daughter from a previous marriage, and we were together for 8 or 9 years or something like that. And today, both Toby and I are now living with that same son that I had back in '87. Did we lose
Yeah.
you? Yeah, just
No.
for a second.
So
Yeah,
Kevin and his wife, Kevin took a job in Washington, DC. We were living in Kansas City at the time. And
Kevin's
he
my
came
son.
to
Yeah.
yes, and he came to our house and said, "I think I just found my dream job on LinkedIn." He said, "The only downside is it's in Washington, D.C." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, if you're gonna go to Washington, D.C., buy a big house because we're coming with you."
Mhm.
'Cause, the grandkids are such an intimate part of our lives, and I wasn't gonna give that up. And he said, "Do you really mean it? Would you really come?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Okay, then I'm gonna do it." And so in just a few weeks' time, we packed up 2 houses and headed for Washington, D.C. for a house we'd never seen that they bought through the internet, and what a whirlwind that was. But it's worked out really well. We live
And we've
down in
been
the
here
walkout
for 3
basement.
years?
3 years, 3 and a
Yep,
half years now. Yeah,
yep,
and
yep,
I
so
just love it.
it's worked out pretty well. Now, I'm in our bedroom here, but, and
Mhm.
Toby's in our kitchen over there,
Yeah.
so we're
Yep.
in the same apartment, but in different rooms.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
and so to connect there were a couple of heavy segments of my life and history that are not connected here. So let's connect the two. So
Mhm.
from the Navy, I got out at just after Desert Storm in 1991. I worked in construction. I also worked in the electronics field, and in both of those areas, I probably put on and off over the course of 20 years, probably 20 years in each of those. And
Mhm.
then uh, meanwhile, I got very depressed and had a lot of problems after the Navy, felt lost. My wife and I split up, and my family was split in every different direction that you could go, including my son, whom we live with today.
Mhm.
But we managed to stay in touch. My son and I did for a lot of his years as he was growing up, and then he joined the Navy and did pretty well in the Navy, and then wound up getting a high tech job and doing very well in his career. Meanwhile, I took some nosedives along the way, got really mixed up in drugs and alcohol for several years, and it really destroyed a lot
Mhm.
of my character and my will to live. And it just was very, very difficult. It took me a long time, maybe 20 years of recovering from just a couple years of severe drug abuse, very severe. Uh, I even had what do they call it? Not a psychological
Oh,
test of some sort,
evaluation. You got
psych
committed.
eval,
Yeah,
psych
you got
eval, and
committed.
yeah, and
Mhm.
they basically came to the conclusion that my drug abuse was so bad that it was really kind of a stunning surprise that I would live through it. And they
Mhm.
showed me graphs of other people that had experienced the same type of drug abuse that I had, and the people that were down in this narrow red band at the bottom of this graph, which is where I was sitting, were people that were digging through dumpsters and were dead within 6 months because they
Mhm.
just never come out of it.
Mhm.
And with me, on the other hand, uh, God stepped in at a point where I was so desperate. 38 cents in my pocket, about ready to die, and didn't care if I did. And he changed everything. And I mean, the story is one that it would take another few episodes of our podcast to explain. But ultimately, the story was that God healed me nearly overnight, that I
Mhm.
had a job within a couple of days. I gainfully employed, and I worked for the next 10 to 15 years just to try to get my sanity back and
Mhm.
try to understand what happened in those couple of years that I was down. And I'm still recovering from it today in a lot of ways. But at the same time, God had other plans for me, including meeting Toby in
Mhm.
Boston maybe what, 10, 12 years later
Yeah,
after the end of my drug
2008 we
days.
met. Mhm.
Yep. Yep. So it's been quite a journey, and glad to be here, glad to be alive, glad that Toby saved me as much as I saved her. So we
Yes.
saved each other at
Yeah.
times when we were both
Mhm.
pretty desperate. So
I mean, I
yeah,
always say, I was on this emotional roller coaster. I'd be, so happy and, and I always say Chris was my keel because he kept me kind of going straight and not tipping over. But I became his anchor because, he said he just wandered and went through whatever doors open. He really didn't have a home. He didn't have a home base. And so I became his anchor and kind of gave him a security and home,
The
made
old
home
ball and
important
chain.
to him. Yeah, the ball and chain. Hardly. Yeah, so when I came
So
across
yeah, now
Chris,
we've been
my
together for, has it
stories
been 15 years?
yeah,
You're
15
usually
years.
better at counting these things than I am.
Yeah, 15 years. But my story didn't phase Chris because he had a story just as big, just as destructive and just as powerful recovering from. So I think
Yeah.
that kind of
And
connects us.
if God can fix me and he can fix you, which first off, if God can fix me, then he can fix anybody. And so I wasn't concerned about him being able to fix you.
Mhm.
And since then we've learned that God can fix anybody, no matter
Yeah.
how bad they are.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, 'cause at the time I met Chris, it was, during the time that my son Greg was going through chemo and he would eventually die from his, lymphoma. Within just less than a year that I met Chris, and Chris kind of really helped me through that because, I was his mother and I wanted to, like, storm in and fix everything and change, and, Chris said, "Toby, this is his battle. This is his life. You can support him, but you can't take charge of it." And, that was a big help, I think, for
but
me.
it's critical to understand that that Greg was 23, 24 years old.
2024. Mhm.
He wasn't a child.
Mhm.
He didn't need a mommy.
Right.
He needed space and he needed power and control over his own life. And for anybody to inject themselves into that and try to fix what was wrong, which was his cancer, didn't he didn't need nor want that, and I don't
Mhm.
blame him. And I feel just as strongly that that as a man, as a young man or an old man, you have to feel like you have some say so over what's going on, and that this isn't for everybody else to solve. This is my problem, and I've got to solve it.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean you have to be on your own. It just means that sometimes it's better to just give that person space. And mommy, the same mommy that raised Greg all those years, was not going to benefit Greg in the situation that he was in. So it was good to give him the space and not just space, respect.
Yes.
Respect is really what it was
Mhm.
about. You had to
Mhm.
respect that what he wanted was space. And so you
Mhm.
did that. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that's incredibly strong of you
Mm.
as a mom to be able to give Greg that kind of space, to be able to restrict yourself when it was tearing you right in half. I could see how much you struggled with it, and it was just it was a powerful exhibition of a mother's love to be able to separate yourself from that while he was going through it, and then not be able to be there until he was literally in a coma on his deathbed was the first time that anybody allowed you to get anywhere close to him, including himself. And so it was when he left us, it was quite a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And, I will always believe he waited for me to get there before he left. And I told him, "It's okay. You fought so hard and it's okay to let go and just leave. You've
Hmm.
done your job." And he died. And I think he was waiting to hear that from me.
Hmm.
Don't think anybody will ever convince me differently.
You know,
But
death is a painful thing for us as human beings to deal with, and letting loved ones go, but it's a fact of life.
it is.
And we have to live through it. We have to heal and understand that it
Mhm.
doesn't mean the end for us. It means, if anything, it just means that we should relish every minute that we have here even more profoundly.
Mhm. And, I think of death as all of ours destiny. I mean, you can't avoid it. It's the one thing besides being born that's going to happen to every single person on this planet. Every other experience we have, they're going to be a little different from person to person, but sometimes it seems like people spend so much time fighting death and avoiding talking about it and doing whatever they can to just get another month, another day. And I think you kind of lose the point because I don't think life is measured in how long it is. I think it's more measured in what you've done with it and what you've left behind. You know, I went in Barnes and Noble not too long ago, and it had a best-selling books, and 3 of them were about living longer. I don't understand the fascination with wanting to live longer. I want to live better. I want to be better. I want to give something to the world that is here when I'm gone. I don't want my death to just be the end of anything I've given. I want it to create some kind of ripple effect that goes on after I'm gone. And, you know, Chris, you and I were together when my mom passed away. And
Your
I
mom was
think my
awesome.
mom's death was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. You know, she was ready to go. She was a happy camper. She was like, "Okay, this is it. I'm ready to go. I'll give you 10 days, but no more because I'm ready." And, you know, my mom's death, I think, was just a most beautiful experience I've ever had to share those 10 days with her and be by her side for those whole 10 days. And you know, I just think that there's a beautiful side to death. And when we make it into something so terrible, it makes it so much more difficult to live through the loss. So,
Well, people that get older, I don't remember where I read it, somewhere about an old man doesn't have he fears nothing and it sort of lives his life day to day uh,
mhm,
with his heart on his sleeve. He just is more genuine and will say whatever is on his mind because there's nothing to lose. Because when you get to be old, when you get really old, you get to a point where you start realizing that every every minute of every day is just it's all borrowed time.
mhm,
It's funny because little kids are that way. They don't realize. They don't have any fear, so they just say it like it is. You know,
mhm,
they see a woman with a wart on her nose, and she's like, "Mommy, look at that! That woman has big brown knot on her nose." And it's like, y- uh, if all of us could just be that honest and open
mhm.
all the time,
Yeah,
that candid, that's brilliant. And I think that's where old people go. And the reality is that the older you get, the more time squeezes us down and gets us more and more appreciative of just how
yeah,
precious every
mhm.
little second is.
Yeah,
So
and, you know, we're both
your
getting
mom was like
older.
that.
Yeah, she was. And, you know, the things that I really appreciate are the grandkids coming down and playing games with us or looking out the window and seeing a rabbit, you know, right outside the door. I don't get joy from looking at our bank account and checking the balance. That
I
doesn't
don't
give me
either.
joy. Whoa, Chris Dorr, you're something else. That's pretty good. So recently, we have been on a whirlwind life together, you and I. We've been together for 15 years, but doesn't it seem like a lifetime?
Well, it has been a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say that sarcastically and go
Mhm.
into being funny about all that, but the reality is that we we came together, and in my mind, I don't feel like you and I came together because we were just gravity toward each other and we just were so wrapped up in wow,
Mhm.
she's amazing, or wow, he's so gorgeous. And there wasn't
Mhm.
any of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff going on. It was a whole lot more to do with the pain of life had kicked us both in the face so hard, and God was helping us through some pretty tough times, and realized that each of us needed somebody that could understand what kind of pain the other one was experiencing.
Mhm.
And it was probably the best, maybe the only way that that I was going to connect with another person like I have with you, is
Mhm.
that God put you in my path with all of the experiences that you had, knowing that I was the kind of person that wouldn't hold it against you, and that you were the kind of person that would
Mhm.
understand that I'm a drug abusing loser, you know. So you fixed me in so many ways, and I hope that I brought some benefit to the
Oh,
equation.
you did. I mean, when I was writing my memoir, Chris and I, when I thought it was finished, Chris and I sat in the media room here and had Microsoft Word read the whole memoir out loud to us. And then we kept stopping it, going, wait, didn't you just say fortunate a couple sentences ago? We need to go change fortunate. I mean, we went through that with a fine tooth comb, Chris, you and I together. And I mean, I couldn't count the number of hours that we spent together talking
Well,
about what I was gonna put in the book and editing what I had put in the book and
those things that you just mentioned, those are all true, and maybe there's a lot of uh, depth of character that sort of gets revealed in those little technical things that you just described.
Mhm,
But what I enjoyed about writing the book with you is spending hours of extracting
mhm,
deeper thoughts and understandings and character out of you.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
to ask you questions and try to get you to, because you don't delve into yourself much. It's almost like most of the time you are too busy working. You're such a hard worker and you're so busy working. And I don't know if it's because you work that you don't talk, or if it's you don't talk because you work. I don't know
well,
which came first, the chicken or the
yeah.
egg, but the reality is that you don't really share a lot of the in-depth psychology, psychosis behind how you were behaving and all that. And I think that's for me, that was a big part of you and I researching how to write this book and how to get
Mhm,
your memoir put together so that we could express to other people just what it feels like to fall in love with a convicted murderer in prison, and help him escape from prison, and you know what kind of madness that is, because
mhm.
it really is a sort of a madness. But that's what that's what infatuation does
Yeah,
to people. It's
yeah,
a
it does.
it's like it's a drug-induced coma that you went through. You
Mhm.
just your brain shut off and your heart was on fire, and when your heart's when anybody's heart is on fire, you can't stop yourself, no
Your
matter who you
brain
are.
just doesn't work when your heart is
There's no logic that can
no, there
prevent
isn't.
you from doing some pretty stupid things
Yeah,
when you're in love with someone.
yeah.
When
And
you
I know, when I first wrote the book, because I worked on it for 15 years, worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and tried to figure out where does it start? Where does it end? And those very first versions, when you go back and look at them, I always say it was like reading somebody's chart in a hospital, coming in and picking up a patient's chart. The patient woke up today. The blood pressure was this. I mean, that's how wooden and factual everything that I first wrote was, because I didn't allow myself to feel it because it was too painful and it was too hard. And you gave me that safe space to pull out those feelings and we dissected them. And we were like, well, Toby, why wouldn't you feel that way? This is what happened. Of course, that's how you're going to feel. And so I think you gave me permission to be me.
Yeah, I think so, and not just permission, but even a push.
Yes.
They I think you needed a push to be
Mhm.
you,
I think so
and
too.
and I I've always thought that it was important for one of my biggest roles was accepting you for who
Mhm,
you are, just the way you
mhm,
are. And
mhm.
that I got to tell you, Toby, that's not easy.
When I bring
You
home a
pain
new
in the
set of
ass.
dishes or a new ceramic bunny or something.
uh,
Yeah.
so 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 your story, I don't know how much you've already shared with other episodes about your story, but I think a huge element, a massive part, it just is this big weight in the middle of your whole psyche and your personality has a whole lot to do with your dad and how he raised you and the burn that he experienced when he was 27.
27, yeah.
Yep. So, and your experience with that when you were just 5, and I I see that there's this weird sort of not what I call a diagnosed split personality, but there's this very strong element within you that when you're professional and you're adult and you have work to do, then you're 50. I'm sorry, 66.
66. Yeah.
66, 66.
Can
Get
you
it? Yeah.
believe it? I
You're
can't.
you're getting on it there.
I
Okay, so
am.
anyway, so 66. So 66-year-old Toby is the one that's about all the hard work and getting the project done and seeing the results and then moving on to the next one immediately because you can't sit still and again, I don't know if that's because you're really all that hooked up into the labor of it and
Mhm.
the duty of it, or if that's just a cover up because you just don't want to face any of the little girl inside you because a little girl is that big weight that I was talking about that just occupies this big space in the middle of your personality and your character and everything is that 5-year-old that just never grew up
Mhm.
and you're still there and I
Mhm.
can't do anything about it and sometimes I could strangle you because the 5-year-old drives me crazy.
Uh-huh.
But you have this element and it's weird because it was also the 5-year-old that disarmed all of those prison guards
Yes.
that they just believed that you could do no wrong, that you were so
Mhm.
innocent, you were so
Mhm.
cute, and you were so little that you were just
Mhm.
non there was no
Non-threatening.
danger.
Right.
Non-threatening, that's right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
non-threatening, and so they were willing to allow you any latitudes in order
Mhm.
to just let you do what you do, which was to, save prison dogs and save convicted murderers from lifetime sentences and, drug abusers
Well, that didn't
from
work out so
themselves
well.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're a rescuer, and,
Yeah.
so the 5-year-old is all a huge part of that.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that she ever grew up because the when your dad was 27 and he got burned, you had this fractured moment from a normal childhood to this traumatic event that just never really quite let you go.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So
I think my dad's burn there were 5 kids at that time, there were 5 of us, and I think that all 5 of us were affected in different ways. Of course, we were different ages, and many, maybe all the rest of my brothers and sisters don't remember that time,
hmm,
but it still affected them, and I could see it as they were adults, and then my parents had 2 more kids later when my dad was home and their life was back to normal. And there was a huge difference in the first 5 of us and the second 2. There was just a
hmm.
huge difference, and, it's it was pretty significant, but I do have to say that I love doing the work. Everything I work on, I am so in love with it. I just can't stop working on it because it just gives me so much joy and purpose and excitement, and
So this is sort of a natural segue into the next portion of this episode, I say, and that is what's going on now and what happens next. And so
that's
I
good.
learned just recently that at Toastmasters they were talking about how you should uh, give sort of an agenda, a summary of what it is that you're going to say, and then give the body of what you're going to say, and then repeat the summary at the
Uh,
end. And it should include sort of what you've learned in the past, or how things are going now, and what you predict for the future.
uh-huh.
And so I feel like in so far between you and I in this last 35 minutes that I think we're ready to talk about
Yeah.
what's next.
So
So
I think that's a great time. I feel like for the past 10 years, all of the work I've been doing, I mean, I wrote the memoir and that's for, anyone. But other than that, outside of the memoir, most of the work that I've been doing has been targeting women who've been in prison or who are out of prison and they're trying to rebuild their lives. And that is part of my audience. That's part of who I am. But I also have this second audience, and this second audience is the woman I was before the escape. A professional woman, um, busy in society, volunteering, doing things to make a difference in my community, and a person with some authority in my job. But it wasn't enough because there was something missing. And so I'm starting to do some work towards that group of women who I call they're professional women. They're at the midpoint of their life. Maybe they're in their 50s or late 40s, the 60s. And they've had children and their children have left home and now they're empty nesters. And now's the time really when they can let their shine out. They can turn into this, bring all their skills and all their gifts out into the world because they have the time to do it and they have the resources to do it. And so I am working on a 3-day summit, which I want to have in person. I don't want it to be virtual because I believe community is so important. And I want people to get together and interact with like minded women and form a community and the friendships. So I want to have this seminar in person, and I'm planning it to last for 3 days. And it's going to be kind of focusing on the metamorphosis journey of women. What's this next stage in life? And what are you going to give to the world from it? And let's help them try to find the thing that sets their soul on fire so that they can bring it to the world and make a difference. And I'm really excited about that summit. And I've got so much work that I've been doing to put into it. And I've also, I mean, Toby Door's my brand, and I have a website, Toby Dorr, and everything has been about Toby Dorr. But we talked earlier about death, and it's so important to me that whatever I'm doing, that someone else could pick it up and continue the work. And I don't think they can pick it up and continue the work as Toby Dorr. So I kind of feel like I need to brand an overarching entity that kind of covers all these things that I'm doing, and I'm part of that. But it goes beyond me. And
I
I
I think one of the things that I find interesting about this is I and maybe this is a gendered thing, maybe because
Uh-huh,
I'm a guy that I feel this way, but I feel like legacy is rather important to me.
uh-huh.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like legacy is that important to you. For you, it feels like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're more into the work and the results of the immediate the immediate results of the works that you do is really rather important to you rather than what kind of a mark you're going to leave on the world after you're gone. Like,
Well,
how many people are going to remember who Toby Dorr is? And
yeah.
so,
So maybe in some ways, but in some ways it's not true. I do want the work that I'm doing to continue on after I'm gone, but
right,
I don't care if it has my name attached to it.
right,
I
right,
want
right.
it to continue. I want to put some things in motion that other women could pick up and continue doing. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I want to give a name to that
So
thing
so
that's beyond Toby Dorr.
let me interrupt one more thing. Is that this crossed my mind back, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes ago, and I was thinking as I was listening to your description of the summit that you're putting together. And one of the things that I think is critically important that I don't think that you mentioned, maybe indirectly by you just speaking and being who you are, that you're inherently being an exhibit of this characteristic, but I think that it's worthy of actually putting a label on it and pointing at it and saying, that's real, and sort
Mhm,
of make people more aware of it. And that is you and your experience in going to prison and helping John Maynard escape from prison. You're a you're an extremely normal, regular, everyday American up until the age of 48 when you met John Maynard and realized that this guy made you feel like a rock star, that you were
mhm,
absolutely on cloud nine, that you were shot off into a such a stratosphere when your relationship blossomed with John Maynard, that you were willing to do anything and risk it all. And there was a lot on the table for you to risk. You had quite a family going on, and you had money and careers and things that were happening in your life, and you gave it all up because you were willing to go to any extreme to just feel validated and feel like somebody loved you and
mhm.
worships the ground you walk on, like John Maynard treated you. And I just think that what's important to say here is that the women that you met while you were in prison and the people that are in prison today and the women that are in prison today will have a connection with you that is organic. It's already
Mhm.
there because you're a
Yeah,
felon, right?
right.
And they can respect that and understand that you're one of them. But the rest of the women that are country club women that you're reaching out to, what they don't may not understand is that they are you too. You're a country
Mhm.
club
They
woman.
are. They
You're
are.
there's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
And the experience that you've had is no different than what they are in jeopardy of. That any
Right.
person can fall victim to
Mhm.
some ridiculous little thing that can just turn their
Mhm.
whole lives upside down. And you
Mhm.
and I always use this analogy that if you are a highly performing professional and you have a lot of stress at work and you swing by the bar on the way home and you have a couple of cocktails and then you drive home thinking that you're okay and you wind up you don't even have to you don't even have to be drunk. You just have to be on the road after you've been at the bar and happen to have the unlucky circumstance that somebody steps out in front of you and you kill them while you're driving home, and the
Mhm.
next thing you know, you're doing time for manslaughter and
Right.
your whole life
Right.
is turned upside down. And
Yeah.
that's as quickly as it can happen
It
just
can
like
happen
that
that
to
fast.
anyone.
That's right. Yeah.
And so those are the people that need to understand that you can make a difference before you go and break John Maynard out of prison.
Yes.
You can
It's
stop and
more
do something different
preventative.
about
The
it ahead
second
of time.
effort that I'm doing is
Did I
more
lose you again?
preventative.
There
No.
you are. Okay.
I mean, the second effort that I'm doing is more preventative. It's more, grab life and make something happen with it because this is
Yeah.
your opportunity.
Yeah.
And, I get emails. I get them every week. I don't share them all with you. But last week I got two, and they were from women who said, "Oh, I just saw you on Dateline," or "I just read your book." And I have to reach out and tell you, "Oh my gosh, that could have been me. I could do that."
Mm.
And people relate. So, and actually, Chris and I went to This Is Criminal podcast this last weekend in Washington, D.C., and it was the best evening I've had in so long. It just was a great evening. But I went backstage and met with Phoebe Judge, who's the host of This Is Criminal, and Lauren, who's the co owner of the podcast, and she's the technical person. And we had the best time. And they even mentioned me in their program that night, and both of them said on a previous podcast that my episode was their favorite. And when we were leaving, we were standing in the lobby and I was talking to someone And this woman came up to me and she said, "My granddaughter," she said, "I don't mean to interrupt, but my granddaughter would really like to meet you.
Hmm.
You're her hero."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, wow." I mean, you know, what an honor for someone to look to me for inspiration or even admiration and want to, and I have people email me and I email them back and they go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you replied." And it's like, well, why wouldn't I reply? So I think I want to reach out to these women, this group of women, and give them some tools because if we could if we could inspire 30 women, 100 women, 1,000 women to take their knowledge and their experiences and start some kind of movements that will change something in someone's world. Wow, isn't that a legacy to leave behind? That's the legacy I want.
Hmm. Uh, I wonder where this is going because we we're still dealing with the circumstances of our lives, and you and I don't have money in the bank, and
Mhm.
we we struggle with all of that. But at the same time, I feel like our character is in the right place. I think
Yeah,
that
I think so.
I think we're doing whatever we can with the meager resources that we can to make a difference in people's
Mhm,
lives, and
mhm.
I just hope that that turns into something really awesome.
Yeah,
It's not going to be easy, but maybe the thing is that God's running the show,
yeah.
and it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what my opinions are. It just what matters is that I continue to do the best that I can, sort of obey, and so that's
Yeah.
all of that's really important to me. So I'm
Well,
kind of looking forward to
yeah.
see where this winds up in the end.
Well, Chris, my mantra has always been to go through whatever door God puts in front of me. And this is the next door. I mean, we moved to Sedalia, then we moved to Kansas City, and we do all these things just on a wing and a prayer. We moved to Washington, D.C. I mean, everything we do, if you were a logical, rational person, we wouldn't have done any of it, but that isn't what we operate by.
Mm.
We go where we're called. We go where we're pushed and we try to make a difference wherever we go. And so I have total faith that it's going to work out and it's going to blossom and be brilliant and
Hmm.
I'm so excited about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if we can make a difference, I should think that at least some part of it would be that we've moved to Washington D.C. Now,
Mhm.
how much closer can you be to the center, the seat of power,
Mhm.
world power, and have an opportunity like living here to make a difference where it can make a difference.
That's
And
right.
it's
That's
so
right.
easy for us to just, we can
Mhm.
drop what we're doing and spend, 45 minutes in the car and be at Phoebe Judge's podcast
In the
event in
Lincoln
Washington,
Theater,
D.C. And
that's 100
a week
years
before
old.
that,
Yeah.
we were at the top of the Washington Monument. And a
Yeah.
week before that, we were at the Smithsonian Institute. And a week
Mhm.
before that, we were
We were in the
talking to
mountains.
people at the college. And yeah, we went
Yeah.
to the mountains. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So
there's,
we're just there's the impact you can make in this area is so extreme. It's a
yep.
perfect place for us to be, I
Yep.
think.
So I'm looking forward to this. I think it'll be fun
Yeah.
to see how things unfold. And this is an election year. Politics
Mhm.
it's in the air. I don't know
Yeah.
where that's all going to take us, but that's another conversation that we should
Yeah.
have maybe
Yeah.
on an episode coming up. And I would speak more in that context than I
Yeah.
would in today's context. I think there's a lot of what this episode has been about is you and me together and what it is that we've
Yes.
done together and
Yeah.
where this has come and gone.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a lot more to talk about. I hope that I can get together with you more and
Yeah.
do another 10 podcasts or
Well, I
something. And
still wanna do another podcast with you where you can share your story because I think your story's inspiring, and we haven't
it
had
is.
time for you to share that today. So, tell me how you felt about meeting John Manard. Because we went to prison and met him in person, which most
Mhm.
people said, "What?" They can't believe that. But
Yeah.
tell about that experience.
Well, John Maynard he's a product of a really broken system. And I don't mean just a little bit broken. It is shattered. I mean, the prison
Mhm,
system, the judicial system, the way that everything is set up, it's a nasty situation. And it's not just John Maynard. There's plenty of other people out there that have been locked away, and they're American citizens, and they've been locked away from all the rest of us, and the rest of us would rather just, me included, I'd rather just not spend a whole lot of my lifetime thinking about all the people that are behind bars that made a mistake. All
mhm,
it takes is to be silly enough to be 17 years old and be with another guy that's 18 years old, that you don't even know that he's carrying a weapon, and that you think that the two of you are just smoking pot and having a good time, and the next thing you know, your buddy has shot somebody in the
mhm.
chest and killed them, and you don't realize that the law is built in such a way to put you away for the rest of your life because you're
You were
refuse.
with someone when a crime was committed, right?
Yes, not just that you were with somebody while the felony was being committed. So that's a felony murder, and I get that. It's not just that. It's also that John Maynard is not valued already
Mhm,
ahead of time,
mhm.
even before the murder and the trial and him going to prison. He was one of those people that the rest of society didn't have any good use for, and they were just as happy to see him go to prison
Mhm.
and get out of their
Right.
hair. And that's
Yeah.
not right. That's not the way that
Mhm.
the world should be, but it is.
Yeah, and if you look around, prisons are intentionally put in places that aren't very visible. They put them out in the desert, or they put them, in the middle of the woods, or they put them back off of a country road. Because it's easier for
Out of
us to,
sight, out of mind.
yeah, out of
Yep.
sight, out of mind. That's right.
Yep.
That's right. So
Yeah.
what was it like meeting John?
So he was everything I would expect him to be, and of course, I knew so much about him. I talked to him on the phone, and I read his entire courtroom transcript from when he was uh, sentenced. He was
His
judged in the
original
courtroom
sentence.
for,
Yeah.
his original sentence, and I read all of that, and I read it all in detail, and I obviously had a lot of insight from my wife, who happened to be an ex-lover, kind of escape artist friend of his, and so I knew a lot, and he lived up to all of what I expected. He was charming and handsome and polite, and he shook my hand, and he showed respect, and there was a respect that both of us shared with each other, that I think that it's sort of one of those things, and I see this in pop culture all the time, that in order to receive respect, you have to show it, and so
Mhm,
that's sort of a lot of what happened with John Maynard and I. What I needed him to know, and you to know, is that I'm not afraid of it. Not afraid
mhm,
of John Maynard, and I'm not afraid of a relationship that you guys had years ago, and I'm not afraid of your history and the event,
mhm.
and you going on the run together for a 12-day vacation in the stylish hills of Tennessee and all that. I'm not afraid of it. I just it
Yeah.
doesn't. There's nothing to be afraid of here. It's just something that happened in the past, and I wanted him to know that I could be in a room with him and show him respect and dignity without also being fearful that my wife is still in love with him, or it was closure for
Mhm,
all of
it was
us.
closure, yeah. It was
So
definitely closure for me, and it was so beneficial.
I don't think there's anything that could have said closure better than just being there in person, physically in person, and shaking his hand. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it sort of makes a pretty powerful statement. It's sort of I've heard that thing that a lion doesn't have to prove that he's a lion. He doesn't have to say
Mhm.
that he's a lion. He
Right.
just is a lion, and everybody
Mhm.
knows it. And
Yes.
that's what I wanted to get across to John Maynard is that I'm not afraid,
Mhm.
and I think that worked out well.
I do
So,
too.
yeah.
I do
I
too.
like John Maynard. I liked
Yeah.
his personality.
Yeah.
He was really easy to talk to. We were there for a couple of hours, weren't we?
Yeah, we were 2 hours, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and it was good. And I remember at the end of the visit, I I remember walking over to the far side of the visiting room, which was a large room,
Mhm.
and away from the table to give you and John Maynard an opportunity to just, say goodbye, and
Mhm.
without me breathing right down your necks,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I it went the way I would expect it to.
Mhm.
Is that I walked away with the girl.
Yeah. Yeah. What a prize. You're about the only one in the world that wanted it.
Well, God
Oh, that's
doesn't
adorable.
value people the same way
Yeah. Yeah.
as other people do. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
gonna share 2 things that I learned from your mother as we close. Um, but I remember when I first met you, and after we started talking to each other, and we kinda had a weird start, but anyway, um, you said to me, for the last 13 years since you and your first wife had gotten divorced, that you cried all the time, and you told your mom, "There's no woman out there for me. I'm just gonna be alone. There's no one for me." And Chris said, and your mom said to you, "Chris, there's someone out there for you, but you just have to be patient because you don't know what God's putting her through to be ready for you." So I like to say it's all your fault.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I accept it. I have broad
Yeah.
shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all my fault. Yep. What you
And the
did in your
last
life
thing,
and yeah.
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 What's the advice your mom gave us when we told her we were getting married?
She said that being in love with somebody isn't about two people facing each other and embracing each other. It's about two people holding hands and facing the same direction and moving in the same direction into their future together. So it's more like
Yes.
you and I are walking into our future,
Yes.
facing forward and not
Mhm.
toward each other. So
Yes.
that's pretty important. And my mom, I think there was a bit of wisdom that was there. So
Yes. She had a lot
maybe,
of wisdom.
maybe
Mhm.
some fraction of that brushed off on me.
I think so, Chris. I think so. Well, thanks so much for being on Fierce Conversations with Toby. Is there anything else you
Yay.
want to share before we leave?
No, but I will think of a dozen more things about 10 minutes from now, so
I'm
I'll
sure
let
you
you know.
will. And you can come right on out here and we'll talk about them. All right. Thanks, Chris.
All
I'll
right.
see you
Bye.
soon.
Howdy.
Bye.
Ciao.
Love you too. Thank you for joining me on Fierce Conversations with Toby. Your support and listening means so much to me, and I hope today's conversation makes a difference in your world. If you would like to support this podcast, there are many ways to do so. I found these ways tend to help the most in getting our message out into the world. Number 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to or watch this podcast. If you can leave a 5-star rating or a like on this episode on YouTube, that helps even more. And if you leave a comment or a review, that helps the most. The next way you can support Fierce Conversations with Toby is to join our Patreon at patreon.com/fierceconversations. All tiers come with a downloadable digital gratitude journal created by me and membership in a private Facebook group that I also lead. Most importantly, 10% of all proceeds from your subscription will go directly to donating my workbooks to women in prison. Finally, sharing the link to this show with your friends, family, and anyone who wants to listen is appreciated more than I can say. Thank you again for joining me today and supporting this show by listening to it and sharing it with friends. Fierce Conversations is created and hosted by me, Toby Dorr. Produced by Number 3 Productions. The theme song that you're hearing now, Groovin', was composed and arranged by Lisa Plass. Lisa also plays the flute for the theme, with Carolyn Parody on piano and Tony Ventura on bass. Find out more at tobydorr.com. This is Fierce Conversations with Toby. Escape your prison.